not all units are built equal, which then raises the question, who is the worst limited 5-star unit in Wuthering Waves? Let's talk about it. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. Okay, so, I'm gonna set a couple of ground rules. We're gonna be assuming that these characters are S0R1, no more, no less. As for what we're gonna deem as negative marks against a unit, well, the main issue that I'm going to focus on is the redundancy of pulling. If you don't really have any specific need to get them because other 5-stars can fulfill their task better, or if they're just not really a significant boost over using a 4-star, then that's a mark against them. No limited 5-star Wuthering Waves unit really has a truly horrible kit, so I'd say that this is the best way to go about it. Also, we're including signature weapons, so if a unit is significantly worse without their weapon, then in the context of this specific video, that doesn't matter. Secondly, I'm only going to be evaluating limited 5-stars, because if we include standard characters, then this video wouldn't be very long, would it? Not much of a discussion to be had if we allow Ling Yang and Colcharo in the room. And finally, I want to say that none of these characters are even bad. The contenders that have chosen to bear this unsavory title are all still very solid units in their own right. They are just the worst of the bunch. Wuthering Waves has done a great job at giving every 5-star character a good kit, but some of their kits are just kind of redundant in the current meta climate. Alright, let's go. The first contender that I thought of for this video would be Yinlin, and that's for a couple of reasons. Her kit isn't even all that terrible. However, she has to be one of the most redundant pulls in all of Wuthering Waves. All she offers is a really high amount of damage, plus some electro percent and liberation percent on outro. So why do I consider this unit to be so redundant? Well, you see, there's two main use cases that you'd want to pull her for. Situation 1 is casual hyper Shangli Yao. This team is very friendly towards players with less skill, so if you main the guy, then it checks out as to why you'd want to pull for her. They do indeed synergize very well together. However, if you're willing to put in some extra effort into gameplay, then you can actually yield equal results, if not better results, when using Changli. Using Colcharo with him also means that you can get comparable results to using Yinlin. However, this will be harder to execute, and is a bit worse than Changli Yinlin. Nevertheless, it is still a viable alternative option. Now I will give Yinlin credit where it's due. You see, if you're somebody that's not really good at quick swapping, then yes, the Spy Lady will actually be worth getting for your mechanical scientist lad. Quick swapping is considered to be a more high-level technique as well, and it doesn't help that units such as Colcharo are infamously difficult to play, so with that in mind, perhaps Yinlin does gain a few points. But otherwise, she isn't a necessity for Shangli by any means, especially when a well-played Shangli quickswap team is actually his best in slot. Secondly, you'd potentially get her in the name of freeing up Joja, if you're somebody that has both a Jinchi and a Carlotta. The esteemed Montelli Lady yields full value out of the silly painter, therefore, you'd ideally want to detach her from the Jinjo Magistrate so they can be paired together, so you could consider pulling for Yinlin as a suitable replacement. Sure, the liberation percent on her outro isn't as good as Jojo's skill percent, however, she does offer coordinated attacks, which can help the Magistrate build up stacks efficiently, not to mention how she's capable of offering some solid personal damage. Seems like some sound logic, right? Your vigor management is healthy, the sun is shining, all's well that ends well. Well, no. Cantarella's a thing now. You'd rather use her, because her skill percent buffs are more effective than Yinlin's large liberation percent buffs, because skill damage is the main meat of her kit. Therefore, you just get more kilometerage out of it. Not to mention how the Phasalia Lady also does coordinated attacks to help out with Jinchi stacks. The only leverage that the Spy Lady really holds over her is great personal damage on Stringmaster. But the thing is, Cantarella is still capable of contributing a solid amount of personal damage even if it's not Yinlin level. Besides, Jinchi's damage is the main thing that matters here, and you'll still be doing more on the whole of Cantarella by your side due to how significant the skill percent buffs are. You've also got Yuan-Wu. He's the worst of all of Jinchi's teammate options. However, he's literally free and works down at level 20. Using that guy can save you a whole lot of limited pulls, so that you can be prepared for the day when Crow decides to slap a dedicated 5-star Jinchi support into the game. So, she has highly viable replacements when it comes to both of her main use cases. So with that in mind, I think it's fair to call her relatively redundant. This isn't even mentioning how the situation is even worse in Whimpering Wastes. She's not actually the worst WuWa unit in the world, since if you have Stringmaster, she can clear enemy waves. Yet with that being said, there's certainly far better options for the game mode, and the main teams that she tends to support are teams that aren't all too hot in the game mode. So while she does retain some redeeming qualities, she's a target on the hit list currently. Up next, I'd like to yap about Roccia. This kid's career was ended before it even started, all because Sanhua exists. Now, I will say, she is indeed better compared to when she first came out. You really had no reason to use her over Sanhua and TO8 as 0 or 1, because they performed so similarly, with Roccia sometimes being barely better or barely worse in a few scenarios, but most of the time, both were on par with each other. This is because, while Roccia offers some very high quality buffs to Havoc units, it's super difficult to compete with a character who has next to no field time whatsoever. I'm being serious, man. Field time is what makes the Wuthering world go round. her personal damage is solid, and she is indeed generally Camellia's best install support. Freeing up Sanhua is great in its own right, but she's just so darn hard to justify. Okay, she's great for Camellia and Havoc Rover, two very strong units, but you can very easily find replacements. Case in point, if you don't want to use Sanhua, then both of them are able to use Donjin as well. You have other options to work with. She simply feels super redundant in TOA, even now unfortunately. Her main saving grace was the introduction of Whimpering Wastes. Her best partner in crime, Camellia, is already extremely well equipped for taking on that game mode. Insanely good multi-wave with good, high AoE damage. It doesn't get much better than that. However, if you throw Roccia into the mix, a unit who has fantastic AoE, really good grouping, and can also offer personal damage, yeah, needless to say, these two being put up against WuWa will yield you some genuinely incredible results. So while she's not really excellent for TOA, you're absolutely gonna find use out of her here. Though, I still think that she ends up being a redundant pull. This is because a Camellia with Sanhua is still 100% more than enough to beat WuWa easily. The crazy lady does so much gosh darn damage, but you'll be mowing down enemy waves either way. And while Roccia's grouping is certainly nice, especially if enemies randomly wander away from you, it's far from a necessity. Camellia's AoE is good enough, and you'll still be able to beat down enemies just fine. So while Roccia definitely has her uses, she's going on Fraud Watch. The issue that I have is that she costs all those limited pulls, only for such a small return on investment. Can you really justify pulling for a limited 5-star character for such a minuscule increase, when you do almost just as well on other options? Sure, WuWa, but if you have Camellia in the first place, then you shouldn't be struggling with the game mode. That DPS is already incredible for the game mode as a standalone character. It's very overkill to say the least. Then the last unit that I'd like to put on Fraud Watch will be Cantarella. You see, the thing is, I don't think that this character is going to last on Fraud Watch for too long. She obviously released ahead of her time, and I assume that the reason that Kuro put her out this patch is due to relevance of the 2.2 story, and also so that they could rerun her whenever her true best install teammate eventually releases, which checks out, as Kuro typically tends to rerun support such as Cantarella, alongside whoever their greatest synergy is. So with that in mind, I do understand that this fraud ship isn't permanent, but as of the making of this video, she is indeed worthy of being slapped on the fraud list, and for good reasons. First of all, her best install synergies as of now will be Jinchi and Carlotta. However, she's not best install for either of them. Her skill percent is better than Yinlin's liberation percent when it comes to Jinchi, and it also allows her to be good for the Montelli lady as a suitable replacement for the silly painter. Though, she isn't best install for Carlotta, more so just a usable alternative if you don't have access to your best options. She also has splendid synergy with Donjin, helping her climb to being one of the best 4-star DPSs in the game. I mean, hey, she was already a contender for that role, but now, she's even more so suited for such a lofty title, thanks to Cantarella's powerful outro buffs. This would be super epic and all, but you see, even post-Cantarella, this isn't even Donjin's best use case. Her real best use case is with 0 teammates, when put in the hands of players that are as crazy as her. Joking. Jokes aside, she still remains as being better used as a Camellia or Havoc Rover support, so they can take advantage of her outro skill, and perhaps her S6 if you have it. Otherwise, she's pretty mid for all of the other Havoc units that we currently have in the game, as there are other 4-star teammates that are simply better than her when considering whether you want to pair her with them or not. For example, Havoc Rover would honestly rather use Sanhua as opposed to Cantarella, so I think it's fair to put her on Fraud Watch. She doesn't have any particular best install use case at the minute, and the places where she is best, you'd rather use other potential team options. So, we've got 3 units that I think are redundant enough to exist on Fraud Watch: Yinlin, Roccia, and Cantarella. Yet with all of that being said, who is the fraudiest of them all? The verdict is, Roccia remains as being the worst limited 5-star in Wuthering Waves. I do not think that Whimpering Wastes was able to save her value fully. Yes, it 100% helped boost her meta position by a significant amount, but there is no justifiable reason as to why you'd spend so many limited pulls for such a redundant increase. You see, in Yinlin's case, the increase is less redundant if you're not a very good player, aka if you can't quick swap. However, in Roccia's case, it's a small increase in TOA, and it's an overkill increase in Whimpering Wastes. Unless you're a player that's aiming for top scores in WuWa, you seriously have 0 reason to aim for this character. Cantarella is safe, because she has that Jinchi use case. You'd get her for the same reason you get Yinlin when it comes to freeing up Joja, but she does the whole freeing up Joja thing better, since you don't have to completely sacrifice giving your Jinchi skill percent buffs. Once again, I'd like to emphasize that I by no means believe any of the units in this video to be truly bad. No Wuthering Waves limited character is truly awful, and each has their own place in the game. Kuro handles this all very well in my opinion, which is why I think it's fair to view these as the most redundant pulls, because even if what they offer is pretty decent, that doesn't change the fact that you don't particularly need them by any means, since what they provide to the average player isn't all that special. Ultimately, just pull for whoever you find fun or cool. That's always been the case in this game. But I did think that it would be interesting to evaluate who's the worst of the bunch in a game where everybody's so good. I actually do prefer that there are some more mid-units. Remember, if everyone's a must-pull, then things can get overwhelming very quickly, and I do believe that units such as Cantarella will flourish in due time. But what do you think about all of this? Do you agree with my takes? Or do you think that they're wrong? Tell me why you feel how you do down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. As always, I have a ZZZ second channel. Head on over and subscribe if you're interested in some fun, silly ZZZ content. I'd also like to mention that I stream on Twitch. I stream once a week every week on Saturdays, starting from 3 PM UK time. Come along so that we can play Wuthering Waves, ZZZ, and do some other fun stuff together. Hopefully this video was able to tell you who the worst 5-star in Wuthering Waves is. This has been Juice, signing out, and another reason as to why Roccia is the worst character is because I forget that she freaking exists half the time. I mean, hey, at least Yinlin and Cantarella are memorable.